right, everybody. So we will get started here tonight. This is the long distance running pre-competition webinar for the October 16th Fall Sports Festival. This will be recorded per usual and then posted on the coaches resource page, along with being sent out over email tomorrow. So on the call tonight, I have myself, the sport staff lead for LDR, Ron Freeman, who's our venue director, and then Steve Bennett, our senior director of competition.
And Mr. Sarnowski, as always.
As always, yes. So the agenda for tonight, as you can see, we'll go over the introductions, which we already have done, so we can check that box. Mike will go over the protocol reminders to start us off here. And then we'll jump into the event information, which will include the schedule. We will go over the entries, how many are in each event, along with the anticipated scheduled times from the shortest and the longest there. We'll go over the venue, what we're looking at for this year, and then a few different pieces that we want to include just to inform everybody on. At the end, if you could save your questions, we will then address them then. But with the smaller group here, if you want to raise your hand, we will stop and address what you have. Feel free to use the chat box also, and we will go ahead and get into the protocol reminders. Mike, I will pass it over to you for this section.
Great, thank you. And thank you everybody for all your work throughout the season leading up to this. It's exciting that we're able to offer any level of competition again, and truly appreciate all the work that you've done to help get your athletes in your program to this point. We are still operating under COVID protocols. We're not going to go into the protocols overall, just sort of the end result of what we've got here. And at this point in time, we're not 100% sure which version of the protocol will apply for distance running. We should know that or be able to make a decision on that, we think, by Monday, and we certainly will send stuff out to let folks know. There's only a few variations that'll affect, so you can still plan ahead. So the two scenarios that are possibly there, we'll look at on the other sides, but regardless of the scenarios, some things that you should plan for is, one, that we're going to have everybody checking in individually. We'll have a tent set up outside the pavilion up by the road. And part of that is because we need the athletes to check in, and then they and their family members or spectators need to be separated going forward. The only way that we can operate and have the event and within the protocols that Special Olympics International has provided to us is to keep family members and spectators, essentially anybody who is not either part of your delegation, registered and such with all the forms and all, registered as a member of your delegation, or one of the event volunteers or staff that we've got operating there. So we need to have that separation. So either way, we'll have a tent set up out by the road. It'll be obvious, there'll be a sign there and so on. Family members will, or the athletes individually, will check in there. We're not going to give out their bibs and such there. We'll still have you do that. So you have control over that, but they'll check in and they'll get, if we have to do screening on site, we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll take care of that there. At that point, the athlete will go over to the pavilion. And one of the things that's key there is you need to have one of your coaches there in order to accept that athlete or those athletes as they're checking in. So coaches, or at least one coach from your program, needs to get there before we open up the check-in area. In fact, this is not an invitation to come later, but we're not going to, Steve and I discussed this today, and we're applying this to all the sports where we have to do check-ins or screenings. We're not going to check anybody in from your county until we know for sure that one of your coaches is there to accept them. We'll have the athletes and the family members wait off to the side, not check them in at all until someone is there from your county who's a registered delegation member to accept them there. But once they check in and once they go over to that coach or other delegation member, from that point forward, the family members, spectators and such who aren't part of the delegation will need to stay separated. There'll be a designated area for folks to watch from and so on. We have operated and run several different competitions, not a distance running one, but several different competitions on this under this protocol or similar to it and it works, and it works fine. But the key is you need to have somebody there. The second thing, the second item there is what I just mentioned there, is that family members and spectators will be separated throughout the event. So, and that means from when they check in until after the athlete has received their award or their lunch, whichever is later, and then they're ready to depart. So it is important to make sure that your families understand that. Most families have been very accommodating and very understanding with that. We don't want to try to abuse that, their good graces or their good positive attitude. However, it is something, this separation is something that is necessary and the only way that we can offer a competition, essentially of any kind, at this point in time. So we hope everyone will be supportive and go with that. So Ryan, if you want to go to the next slide. So the two situations, the two scenarios, one is what we're calling the moderate or high risk. Should be somewhat familiar to you. It's all based on the number of new cases, the daily average per 100,000 and so on. It is highly likely that we will be in what's considered the high risk category and be applying those protocols. So we'll talk about one other possibility in terms of if we hit the 80% of participants being vaccinated, then we can shift and loosen things up a little bit. But what will happen if we're in the high risk protocol, we'll be doing the screening, we'll be asking the questions, just as I'm sure you've been doing at your practices, the 4 questions. Also, if we're at high risk, we need to do thermometer checks, the no contact thermometer screening that we need to do with that. In addition, social distancing will be in place. For masking, if we're at high risk again, which is highly likely, all attendees will need to be wearing, and all participants, that includes the volunteers and staff and anybody else, will need to be have masks on, except when they're competing, at which point it is an option. And that's regardless of vaccination status. If we are in the high risk category, which the numbers look like we will be. Maryland has been hovering right at 20 for the last week and a half, it seems like, and we'd have to drop down to 15 cases for that. So Ron, I'll come back to that question you got. Thank you for that. So anyway, if we are in a moderate risk where it comes down to 15 or lower per cases per 100,000, then for fully vaccinated people, the masking becomes optional, and that may be a game day decision, as they say. And then reminder again, families and spectators will be separated throughout the event. And then we're talking about vaccination here, and we'll talk about it on the next slide as well. It is vaccination or proof of vaccination is not a requirement to participate in distance running. It's strongly recommended. And the more folks who we have having provided vaccination validation or verification, it may potentially help us move into the second scenario, which Ryan, if you can go to that, which is where we could be in the low risk. If we have at our venue 80% of all participants, that's athletes, coaches, volunteers, unified partners, the event volunteers, staff, so on down the line. If 80% have provided proof of fully vaccinated status, then we would not have to do screening, which will make things a little quicker and smoother and a little more pleasant there. Masking, social distancing still in place, but the masking would be optional for all vaccinated attendees, so that becomes easier. Still have the separation and such. So Ron, in answer to your question, Ron was asking, if you saw in the chat that popped up, is the risk category based on by sport? Sort of. And what I mean by that is where we are as far as the percentage or the number of cases per 100,000, that's across the board. For 2 of our sports that we're offering, and we're also dealing with or managing each sport as sort of its own contained entity. There's no big opening ceremony. We'll do a small opening ceremony. I think Steve will touch on that in a bit at each venue. So, and for those of you who made it out to summer games, we operated sort of in that category as well, where track was its own entity, bocce was its own entity, and so on, and it worked well. So where that will vary is based on the vaccination percentage. So as an example, 2 of the sports that we're offering at Fall Sports Festival this year are that being the team competition for flag football and also powerlifting. In order to participate in a competition where it's not just your own area, everybody has to be vaccinated. So they're going to hit that 80% for those 2 sports. Also because most of the volunteers who are coming from the school, might be all of the volunteers that are coming, will be vaccinated as well. It's a part of the policy of the school itself, Mount St. Mary's. So those 2 sports will be at the low risk category. I can't imagine a scenario where they wouldn't be in that case. Then for tennis and for distance running and for cycling, it will depend upon the vaccination level at those areas. I would anticipate that we will be operating in that high risk category. And again, we'll make a call based on, we have a bunch of people who are still registered that I think are going to be scratched because they were never entered into any competitive events. So there's a bunch of athletes that are listed there, probably in the neighborhood of 20 or more who were never entered into any event. And there's a bunch of volunteers, I think, that were just carryovers from training programs. So we can't right now calculate until we know who those folks are. We should know that by tomorrow, and then we'll calculate it out. So Ron, I don't know if that answers your question or if there was more you were looking for with that. It kind of depends, other than the 2 where vaccination's required.
That answers the question, but that prompts another question. So if what I heard you say, Mike, the more Mount St. Mary's volunteers we had at long distance running, the better chance we have of being a low risk?
Yeah, I would say so. We actually got to the low risk category at kayaking, at golf, and at our we had a small cycling competition this past Sunday. In each case, it was the volunteers mostly being vaccinated that put us over the 80%. So it just depends upon the numbers of what we got. So we'll keep an eye on it. We certainly want to move to the low risk. Let me back up a step. We can absolutely have a very meaningful and exciting and fun and competitive competition in either the moderate or high risk categories and protocols that are there. We can absolutely do that. And we can have just a wonderful event for that. It just becomes a little more pleasant, a little more easygoing, if you will, for the folks in the delegations and for everybody who's there, but particularly the ones in the delegations, if we can go to the low risk. And you're right, those volunteers might carry us over that number once we can figure out where we're at. So we have I have a little tool that I put together that we use for calculating all that stuff, and we'll keep you posted on that. So does that take care of that, Ron? Because if you have questions, I'm sure everybody else might on that. The big thing I'd say right now is wait until Monday. With Steve and I have agreed we'll make a call on Monday based on the information. We should have enough in hand for each of the sports, and we will let you know across the board on those. Okay. And I think, Steve, unless anybody else has any questions, we can hand that off to you.
So I have a question. For long distance, it says vaccinations not required.
Correct.
So do you have to? So my question is, we shouldn't have any issues. Is that correct?
I don't know what you mean by issues.
So will we have to be screened, or does it depend on the actual people coming to Fall Fest? Because our team as a group, we're more than 80% vaccinated.
Right.
We're at 80%.
Okay.
So what you're doing is looking at those who are signed up for Fall Fest, correct?
Correct. So it is.
Okay, and it's the
based
percentage
on
of those people.
Yeah, the group that we have to use, group in quotation marks, to figure out that 80% is everybody who's there for the operation of the event. One of the reasons why we have families and spectators separated, in addition to it being part of the protocol, is that takes them out of the equation, since we really don't have any good way to track all that. So yeah, so even though your particular program may be at 80%, it goes by the entirety of the long distance running competition. So it could be, and I'm not going to, there's only 3 areas. Let's not use distance running. A different sport that has 10 areas going to it. 5 of them could have close to 100% vaccination, but the numbers could be brought down by an area or 2 who didn't submit any vaccinations for that. And we've run into that, quite frankly, with a couple of the other sports here. So well, like I say, don't you worry about calculating that. We'll work that out based on everyone who will be there. That's also the reason why, if you have anybody who is not going to show up, it's helpful to know that, because that changes the equation. So, and again, we've sent stuff to the area directors to get any additional vaccination cards, as well as deleting anybody who is not registered. And tomorrow morning, I'll be deleting any athlete or unified partner who is not part of the or has not entered in a competitive event. Thank you, John, for asking that. I completely ignored the little red stuff down in the lower right corner. Because we're making the call on the 11th on Monday, yeah, if you do have anybody who hasn't submitted, I mean, again, we want to stress it is not required for long distance running to be vaccinated. But if you have someone who has provided you the card already, or a copy of the card, or is willing to get it in, and it may help, probably, at least it can't hurt, but it may help us get to that percentage. I know this can be a little confusing because we can't give you a definite answer. But again, through everybody's efforts, and not that we're going to make it every time, but through everybody's efforts, we were able to do it for the last 3 competitions we've hosted, and are optimistic that it's possible for here. Okay.
And this is based on the records of the local county office, correct?
It is based on what has been submitted to headquarters. And they should be sending that in as soon as they get that stuff. Just as when you get a medical, you should be sending it in. They shouldn't be holding on it or sitting on it. It should all be coming in. Does that happen all the time? No. I mean, let's be honest, it doesn't. But they should be sending it in, and we're basing it. We've got to have that validation, that verification of the card, or with a copy of the card there. So. Okay. If there's any more questions that come up on this, I'm going to stay on throughout the call, but let me hand it back off to Steve, so he and then Ron and Ryan can move forward. Okay.
Sounds good. I can cover one or a couple of these slides here. Again, good evening, everyone. For food services and the lunches, thanks to you guys who were all able to get in your lunch orders. So we've collected those, we've submitted those to the Mount, and they are collecting that information and getting ready for their distribution. So what we can say is, based on their schedule, it looks like they'll be delivering the lunches to us around 10:30 or so. Then our group will collect those, organize them, get them ready for each county or each coach, depending on the sport, and ready to disperse those out to the competition venue. So we're estimating that to be at the venues between 11 and 12:30. That does not mean at 11 o'clock you go up to Ron Freeman and say, "Hey, Ron, where's our lunch? They're supposed to be here at 11." We anticipate that those lunches will get to those venues between 11 and 12:30. So Ron will be able to talk with you guys or someone else from the management team down at Long Distance Running to inform you of when the anticipated arrival time is. I will communicate that to Ron, and then he can let you coaches know. But as in the past, those lunches will come prepackaged and labeled, hopefully. That's the plan anyway at this time. And they will be coming to you in boxes for your delegation at Long Distance Running. So that will include everything in the box that you guys submitted for your lunch orders. Again, as we spoke earlier, families and spectators, again, those are non-credentialed members or non-members of your official delegation. Obviously, we know there's a lot of families who serve in coaches roles and volunteer roles for the delegation, but if they are non-registered delegate or non-registered family members, they will be considered general public and spectators, and those individuals will be separated, as we said earlier, from the delegation and from their athletes from the time the coach meets them before check-in through the end of the day. And that's after awards or after lunch, whichever is later, as Mike mentioned earlier. And again, we just look for your support, as Mike had said in some of our previous events recently. Families have been very good with that. A few family members were not notified of that situation, and it did cause some challenges with communications and explaining that to them. So your help as a coach and delegation members would be greatly appreciated to pass that along to those families and spectators. Again, as we kind of mentioned here earlier, this year we are not having the big opening ceremony inside the Knott Arena. That will be a very, very brief opening ceremony at the long distance running venue. It will basically be possibly the playing of the national anthem, the athlete oath, and then welcome, let the games begin, let's go get racing. So it'll be about a 5-minute ceremony, if that, again, just to recognize that the venue is now open and we're ready to begin. Even at those opening ceremony at the venue, in the awards areas and the competition areas, we will have spectator areas designated. That's where the spectators need to remain. That will be about 50 feet away from the closest point that athletes, volunteers, etc. would be there. So we do realize that during the award ceremonies that could be a challenge for getting good pictures, but obviously if they have zoom lens, that's great, but they can also take many pictures on their way after the conclusion of the event, on the way to their cars and that kind of thing. So we know it's not the best scenario for awards and pictures, but again, this is what we are able to do to provide the opportunities for the athletes to compete. We can move on to the next one.
Come in from John, and he said, may family members take their athletes as soon as the individual's event is over? Yes, as soon as that athlete's event is over and they're awarded, they may leave the venue.
Yeah, and let's clarify that, John. Not after the event. So if they're in a race, not after that race, they would need to stay with the delegation. But as Ryan mentioned, after they receive their awards or lunches. So once from check-in to they are ready to go to their car and leave. Between those two windows, families and spectators are separated from the delegation and the competitors. Does that answer your question, John?
If I can just add one thing, and I don't want to give away a surprise, if you will. Your athletes want to be there for the award ceremony. Okay. We've been holding off on doing something for 1.5 years now. That and I'm not going to say anything more than that, other than even if they've earned a participation ribbon, they want to be there for the award ceremony. Okay. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Steve. Moving on to the schedule here. So 8 a.m., the delegations can check in, and that is also when the course is open for inspection. So if you do plan on inspecting the course, which I would encourage you to do before any event, it opens at 8 a.m. here. Please go and get yourself checked in at the pavilion first, and then proceed to that course inspection, which will start at 8 a.m. At 9 a.m., we will have the coaches meeting. That'll probably be 5 to 10 minutes max. After that, the opening ceremony will immediately start. Like Steve covered before, that'll be very short. We're looking at the national anthem and then the athlete's oath, and then we will get the event started. So jumping into the events at 9:30, that's when we will kick off with our first race. So the 5K, that's when the staging will start. At 9:40, we will kick off our first event. So the order of these, as you can see, the times on the left side will be the 5K, the 3K, the 1500 meter, and the 1K. So we expect those will wrap up around 1-ish or closer to noon. That's when lunch will also be held. As soon as athletes are done with their race, they will be awarded. So after your athletes are done, please send them over to the awards area, which will be located somewhere near the pavilion. We will have a clear representation exactly what that looks like once we figure out what our protocol is specifically pertaining to the day, and kind of a diagram where spectators can be exactly where we will be presenting. But again, after they are done with their race, please have them go over to the pavilion there. That's it. Any questions from there?
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry, could you clarify that on the award? So what it sounded like you said at the end implies, for example, the 5K awards would be given while the 3K is getting started, and the 3K while the 1500. Is that how I understood it?
From my understanding, once the athlete has done their race, that is when they'll be awarded. I'm
Okay.
at the powerlifting venue. Steve, can you correct me if I'm wrong with that?
David, I mean, we'll do it like we did it 2 years ago. As you know, as we get the results compiled and verified, whether it's exactly during staging or whether it's during
Well, of course, yeah.
the next race. I mean, we'll just keep things moving. As long as we have everybody there, we'll award it.
Okay. No, I mean, but it's not a situation where like everybody comes back at 12:15 to get awarded. Like
Correct.
the 5K will go sometime around 11-ish or whatever. 10. Yeah. I mean, I know it's not the second event, but whatever. Got it. Or 10:30. Yeah, I got it. Okay. Thanks.
So the events, here's where you can see which events we have to offer, as we just talked about, along with how many we're looking at for each event. 5K for the 1K, 3 teams for the 1K unified, 8 for the 1500 meter. We don't have any teams entered for the 1500 meter this year. The unified race, the 3K race, we have 4. On the 5K, we do have 7 there. On the right-hand side, you can see about the times that we're looking at. From the fastest to the longest there. We have 3 different counties, and representations from each county are on the call tonight. So thank you for joining and learning about the event. So here the course is set to be the same as it has been in the past. There's going to be one change to this diagram. So on the right side, all the way over to the right, this will not impact the course, but I just wanted to let you be aware of it. So right past that parking lot, the Mount just put in a bunch of new beautiful tennis courts. So they will be right above that parking lot area when you're taking the left on that far right side there. So just so your athletes are aware of it. When you're inspecting the course, don't be surprised if all those tennis courts are there. You're not going crazy. They are typically not there. So that's the only change to this diagram. As you can see, the different pillars represent the different races. You have the 1K in pink there. That just goes around the soccer field. The blue with the larger one, and then the yellow, the 5K being 2 laps around that outer perimeter there. So for the course and competition, most of it will be on grass and then gravel. Obviously, you're starting on the grass as you proceed through the course. There will be some gravel and other surfaces. So again, make sure that your shoe attire is correct, as we'll talk about a little bit also. The course will be marked by a bunch of orange traffic cones. Reading through some of the comments from in past years, there could be a little more clarity on what that course is. So we're going to do everything we can to make it very clear exactly where the athletes should be going this year, which will include a lot of traffic cones along with the signage there. Marshals will be present throughout the course along with volunteers. We were looking at roughly 15 for LDR. So I think that will be enough for basically every turn or any area that may be of confusion for our athletes. So we will be going back to back to back. So each race, once one is done, the next one will start. And as Ron was talking about earlier, once a race is done, we may start earlier. So please make sure that everybody's aware and around, just so they can show up to the staging on time and ready to go as soon as the race is about to begin. So with the starts, Everybody will be starting with the mass start. We will be using the gun with the 2 commands. So it's racers ready, which Bob Stack, who's done in the past, will be doing it again this year, followed by the firing of a gun. So there will be no other commands. There's the only 2 that will be given, and the athletes will go after the firing of the gun. With the unified racers, so athletes and the partners need to run together. They need to finish within 5 seconds of each other to avoid being disqualified. So a combined time of both the athlete and the partner is recorded as the official time, just as you have entered into GMS or sent to me to have entered regarding your qualifying time. That's the same way that is entered and then recorded to be presented with the awards. So with the pairs, they may touch and hold the hands. However, pulling, carrying, anything like that will result in disqualification. And again, please reiterate with your athletes that they need to finish within 5 seconds of each other to just avoid that disqualification also. So for our attire, athletic shorts and pants are to be worn, no khakis, denim or cutoff shorts. During the competition, the athletes may not wear medals, ribbons, or name badges. Typically, we see that more of an issue at summer games, where there's a few different events where people may be awarded more than one time throughout the day. The exception of this is going to be the medical alert bracelets or the necklaces, stud earrings and stuff like that is up to our officials. So if there's anything that run at this time that you know typically comes up that you have to ask athletes to take off, let us know after this slide just so people are aware. Athletes in long distance running events may wear a wristwatch to keep their pace, but they may not wear advertising during the competition or during awards. Shoes, if worn, must be appropriate for the athletic competition. Tennis shoes, no sandals, boots are permitted during the race. Is there anything, Ron, that comes to mind at the staging area that typically you have to have athletes take off or anything like that?
Not at long distance running. I mean, you're right, Ryan. It's mostly, those are issues for summer games at the track. We usually don't have uniform issues here.
Okay.
I just remind the athletes and the coaches, we like to have the bibs on the front as opposed to the rear. It's a little bit less of an issue at long distance running in terms of finding the athlete and getting their number, but it's always a good have a reminder to wear the bibs in the front.
Yeah, and that's something we can reiterate at the coaches training also. So for staging, you check in with the clerk at the stated time. Again, be on the lookout in case we're able to start those races earlier, because we will, assuming everybody is around, so we can keep the day moving. It will be in the general area of the starting line. We will have signs that show the start of each of the individual races. I did confirm today that we have all those again, and we'll be bringing them back for Fall Fest. And again, athletes should be at the staging ready to race. So anything that they warmed up in that they typically do and then take off, all of that needs to be done before arriving at the staging area. So for the weather, the rain plan, if it's only rain, we will continue the competition unless it's torrential downpour, it's deemed unsafe for the athletes to continue. If, on the other hand, there's thunder and lightning, we will move over to the pavilion, and then there will be an announcement made how to proceed from there. Currently, 10 days out, this is what the forecast is that I've been given currently. Looking, I think it's weather.com. So if you like weather.com, maybe it's exact, but 10 days out, it's hard to tell. But as you can see, 25% chance of rain currently. But again, that's something that'll be monitored and will be sent out if anything crazy looks like it may be in the mix about some other options after the pavilion there. So a few pieces to touch on here. The protests need to be filed within 30 minutes of the posting of the results. And that needs to be filed by the head coach. That's not an assistant coach, athlete. That will be the head coach with each delegation filing that protest, which then will be reviewed by our protest team. And again, only by the head coach. And then if there is an appeal that is filed, So that means you bring it to us, we deny it. You have 24 hours to reinstate the reason for why it should be accepted, if that's correct, Steve.
Yeah, basically, if the sports rules committee there with officials and Ron, Brian, whatever, whoever's deciding that, if they deny your protest and you want to appeal that decision, file that immediately. Then the games rules committee has 24 hours to rule on that, and then you'll be informed, and the official results will be adjusted. And athletes, if affected, will be given the proper awards officially and then mailed out if there is a change in the actual award that was presented.
That was a much clearer way to explain that. Thank you. The results, they'll be posted in the staging area following each race, and they will be emailed out by Tuesday, the week after the event there. So water bottle distribution, typically we use water coolers around the area. So we will be using water bottles this year to follow the protocol. So we will have that single water station in that start finish area. For the 3K and the 5K races, there will be water for those after they cross the transition area near the start and finish area. Special needs wise, that's typically pertaining to guide runners. That is good to know in advance, just so I understand who's showing up. If that could be documented in GMS under the comment section in the future, that's kind of just a nice way for me to look and see all of the needs that may be made for that day. But feel free, if you have not done already, if there's anything special there, to email me just so myself and the team are aware for the day. So for the questions, we do have a change here. I think all of you know myself, Melissa Anger by now. Ben President is our newest sports director. He's been on board for a few weeks now. He's quickly learning. He's been doing great so far. Really happy to have him on the team. Great person in the office, outside of the office, as a person in general. So again, can't speak highly enough about him and all his hard work that he's doing so far. So he is going to be the sports director for cycling for Fall Fest. So if you have any specific questions, email him and he will get back to you regarding those.
And I'll make one other comment, just for those of you who may have known Zach Cintron in the past. That was one of his sports that he oversaw in the past. Zach has taken another position within Special Mixed Maryland. He's our senior director of IUS, or Interscholastic Unified Sports, at the high school level. So he hasn't left Special Olympics Maryland, but he has moved to a different position. So appreciate that. Just wanted to clarify that in case anybody was wondering. And I think as we open it up for questions, I just want to reiterate from the family's perspective. I know, like for instance, at the state golf championships we recently just hosted in Queenstown, is for individual skill stations at golf. Families have traveled with those athletes as a group. It's not really what we want to have in the normal year, but in the past they have traveled from site to site or station to station. This year, again, with the separation, once the athletes checked in, there is no interaction with the families until they were ready to go to their car. So, John, I just wanted to make sure that that's good, because you had said that your family members or may your family members take their athlete as soon as the individual's event is over. So again, no, unless they're going to their car to leave the venue for good for the day. I just want to make sure that we're clear on that one. So any questions on that?
So David asked if we could show again where the initial check-in screening is. So that will be on that pavilion slide. They'll let me go back. It's that pavilion that's hard to miss upon arrival. And there will be an email going out. I'm going to include some more detailed pictures regarding exactly where all of that will take place around the pavilion after talking with Ron also. And again, that's going to slightly depend on what stage we're in, depending on whether or not we need the check-in area also the screening location, etc. But it will be in that pavilion.
Is this the pavilion where we gave awards in prior years?
Yes, Anna, that is.
Okay, okay.
And Ryan, a correction on that, sorry. The initial check-in will not be in the pavilion. It'll be up on the road by the pavilion.
Okay,
Keep it separated from where everybody else is. So that's where they'll check it in. And then the athlete can then proceed after they've checked in to connect up with their coach in the pavilion.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and to drive that home a little further, again, as we mentioned earlier, that coaches need to be there early to make arrangements to pick up the athletes. We had several situations at the golf tournament, state championships, where athletes had arrived with their family members and coaches were not there to greet the athletes for individual skills or for other for the course play. And so it was very hard to I mean, it wasn't hard to say it. It was hard to implement it, saying, okay, please stay over there until your coach gets here. So it's just not a very good situation. So that's why we're asking you as coaches to get there and make arrangements to let your athletes and families know that, hey, this is where we're going to meet. I'll be there at this time. I'll meet you there. Then we'll do the separation.
Okay. No, so that was really helpful. But so it's the pavilion, the little thing that's near the road. We're never going into the not arena. That's kind of what I was getting at. I didn't want to confuse people.
No.
Okay.
The
But they
only
would still
people,
park. Yeah.
yeah, the only people
Good,
that will be in the not arena was basically going to be powerlifting.
Right. Okay, good.
That and the spectators for powerlifting will be up in the upper bleachers, because powerlifting is, like Mike's indicated earlier, 100% vaccination requirement in order to participate.
Right. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
But
know,
they'll still
I
obviously
say-
park near the not arena, I guess, right?
What's that?
Because that's the only place to park really is near the not arena, correct?
Yeah, correct. And I would say this as well, that we say you won't be going into the not arena, but if there is a major weather situation or an
Yeah, no,
evacuation, obviously health and safety takes precedence. So we would
okay.
evac to the not arena if need be. So
Right, no, I understand that. I was just wondering to instruct people where to go, because we have some people who are new to the program. They'll park near the not arena on that backside. And will there be some signs or people directing them towards, because it'd be hard to explain like in an email to tell people where to go. I kind of
Yeah,
feel like, whereas it used to, in the past, we could say go inside, but
yeah, we'll do our best to line it up with signage, et cetera. And
okay.
I think the other thing that if you could relay this message as well, that because we're also having some additional porta-johns,
Yeah,
portable toilets brought in. But we are trying to keep all spectators, anybody outside of powerlifting or whatever, on the top floor of the not arena. So not entering, if you're walking up from the long distance running, heading towards the not arena, you wouldn't go in the main level. You would have to go up to the top level. The bottom level will be strictly for powerlifting competitors only. There are some restrooms up top, but we will have some portable toilets out in the area where you guys will be.
Any other questions? David, I know you tried to interrupt my thank you slide, but it did not work. So I still wanted to say thank you, everyone, for all your efforts this season and providing those opportunities to your athletes and working with us and them during a difficult time and getting all your qualifying times into me. I really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing everybody on the 16th. And again, this was the first webinar to take place, as far as I know, pre-competition wise for the event. So if after things change and they become solidified, you will be aware of any changes. But here's a general look. It can get your brain thinking. And again, we'll do everything we can to put the appropriate signage up, if not more, and inform you when changes happen. So I really appreciate everyone being on tonight. And everybody had their cameras on, which was great to see your faces. It's just a bunch of black faces. It's all your face. So thank you all very much. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. If I don't know the answer, I will talk to my team. Ron is a specialist, and we will get back to you with the answer. So,
So I'd like to send out to my athletes the course map and the schedule of events. I mean, I did take a photo of it, but can you send out those slides?
yeah, and you will have them tomorrow. So they'll be posted
Okay,
on the
great.
coaches resource page, the long distance running one. And then it'll also be sent over email too, so you can distribute it.
Okay, all right. And I do have a question for you, Ryan.
Sure. You want to ask?
I can wait till after everyone leaves. It's about a volunteer
Okay,
family.
sure. All right. How about you stay on? For
Okay,
anybody else though, we will end the webinar. So thank you all for joining. And again, if you have questions, please let me know.
Actually, David, are you still there? Could you, after he ends the recording, I just want to check with you on something. I can check with Ann. I already checked with John, so John, there's no need. I just want to confirm, recording's off.